Story 1. Process matters even when it results in outcomes I do not like. Giving more power to the executive branch is not a good thing, even if you do not like Congress and the president is from your party. Story 2. I'm so tired of the bootstrap mindset of conservatism. Some people need help. Some people did everything right yet still got a raw deal because of an accident, poor economy, genetic bad luck, etc. But we act like absolutely no one should receive a penny of government help unless it is a business that is too big to fail. Story 3. I'm a liberal member of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, and I think the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community is too concerned with coming up with special labels for themselves, and that only creates division. Story 4. I am very liberal. I think we should take the southern border more seriously and push back on immigration claims more. Obviously, being racist about it is wrong. We need immigration, but we should be more selective about it. Story 5. I'm left-wing, Europe, and I cannot stand polarized all-or-nothing politics. I find some of the more old-school socialist ideas very interesting, but they are unelectable in most developed countries. Some of the hard left will literally watch their parties repeatedly lose and feel smug because they didn't compromise. Well, that's not how democracy works, is it? We need to build consensus, and sometimes that means you can't have all the toys you want. That's a good thing because if the hard left were unopposed, they'd probably create a national administration for the production of oxygen, employing several thousand staff to monitor each tree's productivity. Whereas, if the right were totally unopposed, the country would be encircled in a 100-foot wall, you'd have people doing 20 years in jail for a simple crime, and everyone would have to cuddle a national flag in bed or risk being tried for treason. Compromise is the mother of freedom. If this becomes famous, I want credits. Story 6. This is specific to my home state of New Jersey. We have very strict gun control laws, and I am completely fine with that. However, despite already having strict laws and having low gun crime, many Democrats continue to push for more gun control laws. In a recent round of them, they banned .50 caliber guns. Why? The only people using them were fully law-abiding sport shooters. There were no crimes being committed with them and no incidents of accidental deaths from them. I feel, at this point, their push for more gun laws is counterproductive and just turns people away from voting Democrat, which causes us to not be able to address other things that we need to deal with. Story 7. I don't know why my fellow Democrats can't get behind a secure border. And everyone that sneaked in illegally should get in the back of the line. Plenty of people are trying to do it the right way. Story 8. I agree and disagree with every political party. What I hate is how so many people seem to believe that they have to accept everything their political party believes. Black and white hold none of the answers to our country's problems. The shades of gray are what we need, but too many clowns out there cannot think outside their party's lines. Story 9. I'm very much left-leaning on the vast majority of topics. We criticize the right when they aim to remove books from libraries, then turn around and insist that older books be revised because they contain a few offensive words. I have truly begun to dislike the word problematic. Every time I see it, I know there isn't an actual problem, but rather someone has made an effort to find a trivial matter to take offense to. Story 10. As a traditional, read it as social democrat, I am sick of leftist people supporting Hamas and Iran and not accepting any criticism of Islam because it's racism. Story 11. Hamas is impossible to negotiate with. I am not saying Israelis are doing anything right, but Hamas is not coming to the negotiation table in good faith. Edit, warning. Posting anything that sounds remotely pro-Israel will get you threatened and insulted in direct messages. Story 12. I'm very left-wing, but I have issues with how the left deals with race issues. I think we mistake a lot of economic and class issues for racial ones. White people make up the majority of those living in poverty. Flint might have lacked clean drinking water for years, but places in rural Appalachia have never had it. I think we alienate a lot of poor white people by denying their pain and telling them they're privileged. We push them into the arms of the right. Story 13. Progressive who hates the phrase, defund the police, rather than hold police accountable. Civilized society happens with laws and accountability. Edit. Why is everyone in the comments talking about funding? Haha. It's not a funding issue. Police are not legally accountable for abuse of power. Story 14. Correcting the text for spelling errors, punctuation, replacing acronyms, removing inappropriate language, and streamlining for clarity and sensitivity while maintaining the original message's intent as much as possible. Tolerating intolerance is a contradiction in terms. In Hamtramck, Michigan, the removal of pride flags was reported following the election of Muslim officials, an act that was initially celebrated as a sign of tolerance and diversity. However, supporting Hamas beyond merely opposing genocide because they are perceived as underdogs is misguided. The perspective that Islam is universally adversarial towards women, LGBT individuals, or non-Muslims oversimplifies and generalizes a complex religion. It's perplexing how some progressives can criticize the flaws in conservative Christianity yet overlook similar issues in other religions when those religions are associated with people of color. It is essential to critique and question regressive ideologies that threaten freedom, which many do. This includes recognizing that sexism is present in Buddhism and Hinduism, which also supports a caste system based on birth. Furthermore, giving undue attention to fringe groups like the Nation of Islam does not contribute to productive discussion. The portrayal of hijabs in games and comics as a progressive symbol is seen by some as dismissive of the struggles of women who are fighting for the right to choose whether or not to wear them. This revision aims to maintain the essence of the critique on blind tolerance and the need for consistent principles in advocating for human rights and freedoms while removing inflammatory language and ensuring the text is suited for a diverse and respectful audience. Story 15. I believe that immigration laws and quotas should be more stringent. I also believe that immigrants should be required to take classes that make them better equipped to integrate into the wider community. Too many people are immigrating as economic refugees and then continue to perpetuate the same culture that made the countries they come from undesirable in the first place. Story 16. I lean mostly to the right, but I am 100% against the abortion ban with no exceptions. They say it's because fetuses are human and should have human rights. Like, yeah, but no human has the right to use another human's body to survive without their consent. If I'm bleeding out and you're the only person who can donate blood to me for whatever reason, you can still refuse to donate blood, even if I'll die without it, and that doesn't make you a murderer. You are just exercising your rights. You don't need all of your kidney to survive, but you also can't legally be forced to donate some of your kidney to your toddler who would die without the transplant, because it's your body. Whether it's morally wrong is up to the individual, but legally we need these rights. Story 17. I am a member of the Green Party in Germany, and I strongly disagree with the approach of retiring nuclear energy first and coal later. Yes, both should be phased out in the long run. However, if we are faced with the choice of producing a little more nuclear waste, which hasn't really increased the size of that problem too much since we already have lots, or producing more carbon dioxide, I will choose nuclear energy, thank you. I am aware that nuclear energy is not carbon dioxide neutral, but it is significantly better than coal. Story 18. On the Canadian left, I don't care about criminals more than their victims. I just don't. I'm way less interested in rehabilitation than I am in victim services and making sure they feel like justice was enacted. Like low-level Trailer Park Boys crime? Sure, let's shoot for rehabilitation. That goes out the window when we're talking about violent sexual assault and murder. I don't want to share our society with those people. Also, gun control being almost entirely focused on long guns and proper users, and seemingly not as much focus on stemming the tide of handguns illegally brought in from the border with the states. Walter from Saskatchewan is hardly the root of our gun issues. Story 19. I am liberal. I have zero sympathy for Hamas. It needs to be wiped off the face of the earth, and if there is evidence of resurgence, they need to be nipped in the bud as well. I would have far more sympathy for Gaza if it weren't so intrinsically linked to Hamas. While I do believe Netanyahu and his backers are a bunch of crooks and should be in prison, I feel it is utter madness to let a group so openly hostile continue to exist on your border, especially after October 7th. Story 20. Socialist. Wanting to neuter law enforcement into destruction and dispense with police is completely idiotic. To be fair, I rarely encounter other leftists who actually believe this either. One idea on the left taken more seriously, universal basic income, is a bad idea and won't work. As soon as you give everybody certain dollars, all of the local prices will suddenly and mysteriously go up by the same amount too. No matter how much you just give to the poor, our society will connive to find new ways to steal it and put it back in the hands of lords or power holders. Story 21. I'd consider myself decently far left, especially when it comes to immigration. I support the deferred action for childhood arrivals and would love to see comprehensive immigration reform. However, we can't simply have tens of thousands of people showing up at the border every month. Those forced bus trips, which are likely illegal and absolutely terrible, moving migrants from Texas and Florida to New York City and Chicago, gave those cities a small taste of managing a humanitarian crisis that has lasted for decades. Story 22. I'm a liberal. The left, and by extension the LGBTQ+ community, has spent so much time creating all these unnecessary labels that the whole goal of the LGBTQ+ has been minimized because everyone thinks it's not serious. Deal with the issues that matter, like members of the LGBTQ+ community being harmed for being a member, not the fact that you're a polysexual, gender nonconforming demiqueer. As soon as you start mentioning all of that, nobody listens to anything you have to say. Story 23. As a conservative, I am sick of the endless focus on banning all abortions. The debate is over, and the pro-choice side has prevailed. It is time to move on. Story 24. I mostly vote for leftist parties, but I completely disagree with most of the left's stance on the Palestine-Israel conflict. There are so many groups and people within the left who not only align themselves with groups like Hamas, but more or less say that they feel like they are justified in their actions, which they are not. When talking about the October attacks, some even refuse to call them terrorist attacks, but rather a resistance by the Palestinian people. It's something parroted a lot by various people within the left. It's insane how these groups think. They are pretty much doing what they accuse the right of, spouting things without thorough thinking. Story 25. For reference, I'm British and lean politically to the right. However, I fundamentally disagree with fellow right-wingers who are skeptical about the reality of climate change and therefore attempt to slow efforts to combat it. In fact, I think there are a number of excellent right-wing justifications for climate-friendly policies. As the patriotic side of the aisle, ought we not be doing more to protect the country we love from pollution? Wouldn't building more nuclear and wind plants give us increased energy independence from foreign providers who are unreliable allies at best? And since we want to reduce immigration, surely it's in our own interest to combat climate change before disasters elsewhere in the world exacerbate the numbers seeking to migrate. Even if you don't want to agree that climate change is a man-made phenomenon, surely the reasons I gave above, protecting our lovely countryside, securing control of our own power supply, and reducing immigration, are reasons enough to move in a green direction. Story 26. I'm broadly speaking liberal/lefty, but I'm not in favor of removing the monarchy. It's not so much that I'd be clamoring to start one if we didn't have one, but since we do already have one, I'm fine with it staying. If it misbehaves, we can turf it, but I'm not convinced that centralizing those powers into our elected politicians is going to be better for us either. Story 27. As an American moderate, I will tackle both sides. Liberal. The LGBTQ+ movement has gone way too far. Gender is synonymous with sex. Take it easier on religion too. Conservative. Climate change is real, and we need to invest more into developing solutions. Overriding any policy I can name, however, Trump is not the answer for anything. Both sides. Be more mentally tough, be more willing to compromise, and cut out the racism. Though I will say the rest of the world is way worse with racism, and you should all be ashamed. Story 28. I don't think it's eugenics to tell people who are living in instability and poverty that they shouldn't procreate. It's common sense. Children are not an experience you're entitled to. They're their own human beings. Setting them up for failure by bringing them into uncertainty is unfair. Story 29. I'm a pretty far leftist, but there's a ton of black and white thinking among leftists, and people keep fighting with each other over the pettiest things, even when we 90% agree on everything. It drives me nuts. Story 30. Gun control. That ship has absolutely sailed, and I would sell it down the river in a second for a real climate change policy. Plus, if we don't get our collective act together here, we might need them. Story 31. I don't think student loans should be forgiven. I think they should be better regulated with a cap on interest rates instead. However, I understand that my idea would require Congress to cooperate, which makes it harder to achieve. Story 32. I've got a couple. As you can probably imagine from my profile name, I'm pro-life. I support exceptions for rape and incest and double jeopardy, and I can imagine times when an abortion is necessary for medical emergencies, but generally, the left being fine with abortion as a freedom, something a woman can get because of an accidental and inconvenient pregnancy, just doesn't sit too well with me. I feel like the left doesn't really talk about that side of it much because it's not the most attractive reason for supporting abortion rights. Calling it healthcare, focusing on the times when it's necessary makes sense as it highlights the dangers of the rights no exceptions policies. But they need to own up to the other part too. And I've had the debate with my conservative Christian parents too. Why do you support Democrats in every election when they are openly for abortion? They say. I always say that I support policies to reduce the necessity of abortion, better WIC care, better hospitals, paid family leave, raising wages, and the middle class stuff that the right only pays lip service to. So come November, I'll comfortably cast my ballot for Harris walls because they're not weird and also because they support all those other beneficial policies. Also, and I don't really know how controversial this really is on the left, but I'm not really into the socialist light side. Accelerationists like Vosh just aren't my cup of tea. I recognize that we need a change in this country, but capitalism isn't some evil, destructive force by itself. The unchecked version of it that we have now is, though. I like what Cenk Uygur said in his book Justice is Coming, where he was talking about Bernie's democratic socialism, and he said he kind of prefers democratic capitalism as a concept. And it hit me right then that that's what I support. A mostly free market that allows small businesses to be built and maintained and freedom for people to get really rich, but also have some guardrails to protect workers and the environment. Finally, I have a bit of a hard time with the pro-Palestinian protesters and the political commentators who are saying they're going to vote third party because of mainstream Democrats' support of Israel. First, I will say that I do not support a lot of Israel's tactics here, but I'll be honest, before last October, I knew basically nothing about the conflict and had been raised by conservative, mildly pro-Israel parents in a country that always supports Israel. Then October 7th, 8, 9, Cenk and other commentators are saying Netanyahu is a monster and worse by the numbers than Hamas, and now the protesters are causing a ruckus but know it's fine because they're on the right side, and several prominent commentators are refusing to vote in November and encouraging their audience, many of whom in swing states, to do the same despite Trump being demonstrably worse on the issue. And it's like, damn, I want to get fired up about this issue and be on the right side, but I barely know anything about the complex history. And how in the world is this the only line you can't have crossed for the vote? You all sound like the Catholic media I listen to that says you can't vote for any pro-choice candidates no matter how much you might agree with their other policies, which is crazy too. Anyway, end of rant. To anyone who actually took the time to read all this, you might be thinking I'm not really a left-winger, but I assure you I am. I've just got some contentions with my side and want it to be the best it can be,